Exclusive contract novel from Feilu Novel Network. I just ascended the throne and proclaimed myself emperor. Did World War II break out? Qin Zhen crossed parallel worlds in 1929 and became the emperor of a small country guarding the Strait of Malacca. The Great Qin Empire. With a population of 15 million and the majority being Chinese, it was founded in the 13th century as the world's first maritime hegemon and the first capitalist country. One of the earliest industrialized countries. But the tyrant led the country astray, and the empire went from prosperity to decline in the 18th century. Colonies were occupied by Western powers, and they were blockaded year-round. The First World War suffered a disastrous defeat, and they never recovered. Qin Zhen is numb. This is the beginning of hell. Fortunately, with the binding of the fishing system of the heavens and the world, mineral resources, talents, and technology can all be caught. So, a monster rose up in Dongnan, Great Britain. I was wrong, Indido is yours, and Princess Elizabeth is also yours. Chiang Kai-shek. With the brotherly country of Daqin, my advantage lies in me. Xiao Ri. Ah, don't come over. Beautiful country. Your Majesty, calm down. We have never considered competing for world hegemony. Germanic. The Great Qin is our closest ally of the Germanic Empire. Polar bear. Qin Zhen is a disaster. Feilu Novel Network reminds you that this novel and its characters are purely fictional. If there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental and should not be imitated. Chapter 1. In 1931, Emperor Qin Zhen of the Great Qin Empire. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Your Majesty, last night, according to a carefully planned conspiracy, the Fusang Guangdong Army stationed in the northeast of Zhonghua bombed the South Manchurian railway tracks built by Fusang near Liujiao Lake in Fengtian, and blamed the Zhonghua Army. The Fusang Army used this as an excuse to bombard the northern camp of the Northeast Army. Today, the Fusang Army invaded Fengtian. Fusang's intention is very clear, to completely occupy the three eastern provinces. In the spacious and bright office, the Minister of National Defense, Xianyang, finished his report and looked at His Majesty Qin Zhen sitting in a chair with a gloomy face. After a long silence, Qin Zhen sighed and waved his hand, gesturing for Xianyang to leave. Seeing that the emperor's expression was not right, Xianyang stood at attention and saluted, respectfully exiting the office and gently closing the door. His mother, it's time to come. Qin Zhen lit a cigarette, got up and walked to the French window, looking through the glass at the small but elegant palace. He is a time traveler who has been traveling through this eerie parallel time and space for 2 whole years. He even started his journey and became the emperor directly. Why is it eerie? Because in this parallel spacetime, there is actually an island country called Daqin, located on the Indian Ocean, forming a triangle with Sumatra and Sri Lanka, facing the Bay of Bengal and guarding the Strait of Malacca. It covers an area of 108,000 square kilometers and has a population of 15 million, with 90% being Han Chinese. The founding of the Great Qin Empire can be traced back to the 13th century, when the Yuan army went south to destroy the Song dynasty. The year before the downfall of the southern Song dynasty, in the autumn of 1278, Qin Shao, the strongest head of the Qin family in the southern region, saw that the situation was hopeless. He immediately exhausted his family's wealth to search for elite talents such as craftsmen and literati, and invested enough to buy a large number of ships. He fled overseas with hundreds of thousands of Han people, and after going through countless difficulties, he arrived at this geographically advantageous island, which was still occupied by the indigenous people. He used force to expel the indigenous people, dressed in yellow robes, and established the Great Qin Empire. In the 13th century, before the beginning of the Age of Discovery, Qin Shao had a sharp eye. He used the large number of craftsmen he brought with him and the rich resources of Dongnan to build warships and went to the homeland of flower planting to fight against the Yuan army. He took away the flower-planting people who were unwilling to tolerate the cruel rule of the Yuan dynasty and expanded the population of the Great Qin. In addition, the Qin navy also attacked the countries of Dongnan in Asia, plundering wealth, resources, and indigenous slaves. Until the early 14th century, the population of the Great Qin Empire had exceeded 10 million, ruling over most of East Luan and guarding the Strait of Malacca. The Great Qin navy leapt to become the world's #1. Qin Shao also vigorously carried out maritime trade, and the merchant ships of the Great Qin Empire shuttled through the ocean year-round, with the most frequent trade exchanges with the continent, indirectly promoting the arrival of the age of great navigation. In 1340, at the age of 92, the founding Emperor Qin Shao passed away, and the elegant and refined Emperor Wen of Qin succeeded him. He gradually stopped expanding and instead focused on developing maritime trade. In 1368, Zhu Yuanzhang founded the Ming dynasty and ended the rule of foreign tribes. Due to the fact that the Ming dynasty was a Han dynasty, Emperor Wen of Qin took the initiative to establish diplomatic relations with it. Zhu Yuanzhang considered that the strength of the Qin dynasty was too strong, and that the remnants of the Yuan dynasty had not been completely eradicated since the establishment of the Ming dynasty. The country was constantly ravaged by war, riddled with wounds, and people's livelihoods declined. Therefore, he became sworn brothers with Emperor Wen of Qin, formed a brotherly country, and even swore blood as an alliance to never invade each other. Both countries are Han Empire, one is a land hegemon and the other is a sea hegemon, controlling East Asia and East Asia to the death. Other small countries complain incessantly and can only become vassal states. However, as time passed, Zhu Yuanzhang passed away, Zhu Di passed away, Zhu Zhanji passed away, and a god of war emerged in the Ming dynasty. The Tumu fortress incident led to a sharp decline in Ming's national strength. The Great Qin was not much better either, giving birth to two despicable rulers and encountering the rise of Western countries. After several disastrous defeats, Dongnanya was gradually eroded by Western countries. However, the Great Qin dynasty had abundant cultural heritage and was the first to implement a constitutional monarchy in the early 17th century, avoiding a corrupt monarch and causing harm to the country. After its national strength was restored, it stood firm under the siege of Western countries and seized the opportunity of the First Industrial Revolution, once again becoming a world power. The Ming was not so lucky, even though the Qin supported many advanced firearms and artillery, they were still destroyed by the hands of Mi Qin, and the flower-planting nation suffered an unprecedented catastrophe. Might Qin entered the border, it's not that the Qin didn't want to send troops to help, it's because he doesn't have that ability. The Western countries do not want to see the emergence of two superpowers in Yazhou, who are desperately suppressing and weakening the Great Qin. Among them, Great Britain is the most active because their beloved Indu colony is less than 1,000 kilometers away from the Great Qin in a straight line. On the side of the bed, how can others snore and sleep? So, after the outbreak of World War I, Qin was also involved. Due to the commander's misjudgment, the navy suffered a fatal blow in the Indo-Sea, and the local coastal industrial areas were also devastated by the British Navy, which never recovered. Good fortune never comes twice, but bad luck never comes singly. In 1925, after the end of the First World War, Qin also encountered the devastating pestis, which killed 10 million people in 3 years, leaving only 15 million people, almost destroying the country. Great Britain seized the opportunity and intended to exert all its strength to annihilate the Great Qin and occupy the strategically important Qin Island. However, the economic crisis that swept through Western capitalist countries in 1929 saved the life of the Qin. Although the light and heavy industrial system in present-day Qin is relatively complete and still ranks among the top 10 in the world in terms of strength and abundant talent reserves, due to being an island country and being constantly blocked by Western powers such as Great Britain, resources are scarce and it cannot develop at all. Qin Zhen traveled over and after learning about history, his whole life was not good. This is the beginning of hell. Without resources, without strength, one can only stay on the island and barely survive. It is uncertain that one day they will be joined up by foreign powers to eliminate and divide up. There's no way. Qin Island's geographical location is too domineering. It's both a goalkeeper in the Malacca Strait of the Bay of Bengal and close to Indu. Great Britain probably dreamed of annihilating Qin. Qin Zhen's face was full of sorrow, pondering how to break the game. In the industrial era, resources are national strength. Without resources, it is the meat on the chopping board that can be slaughtered by others. The headache is that although the area of Qingdao is not small, it is 108,000 square kilometers, which is equivalent to the area of Zhejiang province. But the resources on the island are scarce and far from sufficient for development. It used to be okay. Dongnanya was under the control of the Great Qin, and there was no shortage of resources. After World War I, the Great Qin was completely locked down by Western powers led by Great Britain, and could not even buy minerals. Difficult. Qin Zhen looked up melancholy, looking at the blue sky and white clouds. The sense of crisis had already overwhelmed him and he couldn't breathe. The current time is September 19, 1931, and the September 18 incident has already erupted, less than 8 years after the Second World War. If we can no longer find a solution to break through the situation, a world war will break out, and Xiao Ri will sweep through Dongnan. With Xiao Ri's ambition as a wolf, the Great Qin will surely perish. What should we do? Thinking of the downfall of the Great Qin and the enslavement of over 10 million people by the Japanese, Qin Zhen smoked faster and his mood became increasingly bad. Ding, the system has been loaded. Do you want to start it? Chapter 2. The fishing system of all heaven and all world, awesome. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ding, the system has been loaded. Do you want to start it? Bedroom, system. Just as Qin Zhen was feeling anxious, a cold voice suddenly appeared in his mind. His mother, you finally came. 2 years ago today, I traveled back and still haven't figured out my current situation. In a state of confusion, I ascended to the throne and proclaimed myself emperor, becoming the 18-year-old emperor of Great Qin with the reign title Hongwu. After accepting the fact of crossing over, he became numb. This emperor is not easy to be, and the danger of annihilating the country is imminent. Even if he has been devoting all his energy to governing the country and striving to become a good emperor in the past 2 years, seeking solutions to break through the situation, and making the Great Qin Empire rise again and become a powerful country in the world. A clever woman cannot cook without rice, without resources, no matter how hard she tries, it will be in vain. The system, Qin Zhen has never imagined that this walkthrough must have a hanging artifact. As a result, it has been 2 years and it hasn't appeared yet. God has treated me well, you have finally arrived. Qin Zhen was ecstatic and immediately began to silently recite in his heart. Shua. A light blue fishing rod appeared in my mind, giving people a mysterious and unpredictable feeling. Fishing rod. Qin Zhen wondered, what's going on here? Shouldn't it be a superpower system, a military industry powerhouse system, or something like that? At the very least, we need a red alert system or something. What can a fishing rod do? Fishing for me. When he was lost in thought, a piece of information flooded into his mind, the system manual. After reading, Qin Zhen was bewildered. Well behaved, this fishing rod is extraordinary. It is a fishing rod from all heavens and all realms. With it, one can fish for objects from all heavens and all realms. But this fishing rod is a regular fishing rod, without the ability to catch items from the immortal world or extraterrestrial civilizations. The technology was limited to 1 fishing opportunity per day before 1950. The fishing rod can be upgraded, but the method is not yet available. After understanding the functions and fishing rules of the fishing rod, Qin Zhen's mood was complex, both happy and worried. This fishing rod may seem very powerful, but in fact, the uncertainty factor is high. What if the thing caught is scrap metal? No, give it a try and see what you can catch. According to the system's instructions, Qin Zhen rubbed his hands and clicked to fish. Shwa. A golden light flashed by, and the sound of the system broadcast came. Ding, fishing is completed. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 10 million tons of finished crude steel, 10 million tons of rice, 2 million tons of crude oil, 2 million tons of finished aluminum, 2 million tons of rubber, 2 million tons of finished copper, nickel, manganese, magnets, tungsten, antimony, tin, pig hair, tung oil, molybdenum, chromium. A complete set of drawings for Type 56 semi-automatic rifles, PKM universal machine guns, T-34 tanks, Iowa-class battleships, Montana-class battleships, Little Eagle-class aircraft carriers, and P-51 Mustang fighter jets. Complete set of drawings for F-6F Hellcat carrier-based aircraft, A-3 fire control radar technology, First Class aviation engineer, First Class ship engineer, First Class metal smelting engineer, and First Class mechanical engineer. The 3-minute broadcast ended, and Qin Zhen's mouth opened in an O shape, leaving her mind blank. Sleeping trough, so fierce. Not to mention crude steel, there are dozens of urgently needed industrial materials such as petroleum rubber, copper and aluminum, nickel, manganese, magnets, tungsten, antimony, tin, pig hair, tung oil, molybdenum, chromium, etc., all of which are even millions of tons. This is simply a timely help. In addition, there are also technical drawings for various weapons and equipment, including those flying in the sky, those running on the ground, and those swimming in the sea, all arranged in place. The most impressive thing is that even top engineers are available, which is very user-friendly. With my system and these resources, Qin will soon be able to revive and become a world power again. Ding, host, don't be too happy too early. This is a beginner's benefit, equivalent to a beginner's gift package. Starting from tomorrow, you may not have such good luck. Wishing you a pleasant use and goodbye next time. The system woke up and brought Qin Zhen back to her senses from her lustful thoughts. So it's a beginner's benefit, no wonder. Qin Zhen was not disappointed either. Being able to obtain so many resources was already a blessing from heaven. After all, those who are satisfied are always happy. 10 million tons of steel, as well as tens of millions of tons of various scarce metals, are enough to meet the needs of the Great Qin dynasty within 3 years. These 10 million tons of steel may seem rare, but in reality, there are quite a few. Looking at the current world powers, there are no more than 3 that can produce more than 10 million tons of steel per year. During World War II, Xianyang jumped so fast that from the start of the war to surrender, the annual steel production never exceeded 10 million tons. Dong dong. At this moment, the office door was knocked on. Qin Zhen sorted his thoughts and sat down on the sofa. He extinguished his cigarette and whispered, "Come in." The door pushed open, and a middle-aged man with meticulously combed hair, dressed in a black suit, strode in. Li Xiong, the Prime Minister of the Great Qin Empire, was also Qin Zhen's uncle. "I pay my respects to your Majesty." Li Xiong did not omit the etiquette of the emperor and his subjects just because he was the emperor's uncle. When he walked up to Qin Zhen, he bowed respectfully. This nephew, who is only 20 years old, is not a master that can be controlled. After 2 years on the throne, he has seized power through various means. The commanders of the land, sea, and air forces, as well as several cabinet ministers, are his confidants. Who dares to disobey him? Qin Zhen waved his hand and smiled, "Uncle, there's no need to be so serious in private. Sit down." "Your Majesty, thank you." After Li Xiong sat down, Qin Zhen noticed that his face was not right and realized that something might have happened. As expected, Li Xiong said in a deep voice, "Your Majesty, half an hour ago, the beautiful country of Great Britain, Gaul, simultaneously refused to export grain to Great Qin and did not allow other countries to export grain to Great Qin. Our national treasury's grain reserves are only enough to last until the end of the year." His mother, it's too much. Upon hearing this bad news, Qin Zhen became angry. Western powers were trying to push the Great Qin to a dead end. Although Qin Island has a large area of 108,000 square kilometers, 75% of it is covered by primitive forests and is not suitable for growing crops. Due to its tropical monsoon climate, it is as hot as summer all year round, with an average annual temperature of 28 degrees Celsius and an average annual precipitation of 1,300.3500 millimeters in various regions. The average highest temperature in coastal areas is 31.3 degrees Celsius and the average lowest temperature is 23.8 degrees Celsius, while the average highest temperature in mountainous areas is 26.1 degrees Celsius and the average lowest temperature is 16.5 degrees Celsius. There are many rivers and lakes in the area, accounting for 11.8% of the total area, and the flat ground is less than 15%. Qin Island was the stronghold of the Great Qin Empire. After the First and Second Industrial Revolutions, most of the land was used to build industrial zones and cities. The amount of farmland was pitifully scarce, and it relied on imported food to meet the needs of 15 million citizens. So, the sinister tactics of Western powers are too vicious. Oh, no, I have a system. Calm down, Qin Zhen suddenly remembered that there were 10 million tons of rice in the fishing supplies just now. 15 million people, even if each person eats 3 kilograms of rice every day, it is enough for a year's needs, not to mention the daily fishing that will surely catch food and meat. Afraid of a hammer, let them block it, I am indecent and develop. Don't worry, I have a solution. Chapter 3. Hell Mode, the Cruelty of Western Powers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Is there a way to solve it? Li Xiong, who was so anxious that his hair was almost on end, couldn't understand what this great-nephew had to rely on. He didn't even worry about being blocked by Western powers. Without food, Qin probably wouldn't have to rely on external attacks from the enemy, as internal turmoil could have destroyed this ancient empire that had been established for over 600 years. Your Majesty, I'm afraid. Don't be afraid, I said there is a solution. Uncle, please prepare to build 14 giant granaries in 7 provinces across the country and issue notices to appease the people. Don't worry about food issues. The government will distribute free food, oil, and meat to every citizen of the empire. Qin Zhen waved his hand and interrupted, giving orders to Li Xiong in an unquestionable tone. The Western powers are determined to blockade, and the news cannot be concealed. Rather than giving Western powers the opportunity to incite the people of the Great Qin and cause widespread panic and riots, it would be better to first put on the posture of lousy having food and not afraid of your blockade. Li Xiongren is all foolish. Free distribution of grain, oil, and meat. My emperor, there are 15 million people in the country. How much grain, oil, and meat do you need to consume every day? Have you calculated? Your Majesty, I am not suspecting you, but... Qin Zhen comforted and said, Uncle, I have enough confidence to resolve the crisis, and you have to believe that there are no eternal enemies, only eternal interests. As long as I hold on for this period of time, I will find a way to make Western powers understand the difficulties and retreat. Really? Faced with Qin Zhen's resolute gaze, Li Xiong still felt uneasy in his heart, feeling that the emperor was not very reliable. Impossible. The Great Qin dynasty was established for over 600 years and was once the world's largest power. When the Qin navy ruled the ocean, the western white pigs were still feeding on their fur and drinking blood. How could they possibly bow down and submit to these barbarians? Yes, Your Majesty, I will send a notice to organize the construction of a granary. Li Xiong stood up and bowed, then turned around and left the office. Qin Zhen watched as Li Xiong left, his lips slightly raised. It has to be said that the Great Qin dynasty is different from the flower-planting republic, and there is a huge difference in national confidence. No matter how weak the Great Qin was, Western powers would not be able to land on Qin Island because it had a complete industrial system, strong military strength, and a stable army of 500,000. The education system was still ahead of the West before the 20th century. If it weren't for the alliance and siege of Western powers in World War I, it wouldn't have been so bullied by Western powers and had no strength to counterattack. The skinny camel is bigger than the horse, which is also the reason why the confidence of the Great Qin nation remains high, believing that the Great Qin was only a brief decline and that it will eventually rise again. Looking at the black background golden dragon flag on the table, Qin Zhen couldn't help but sigh. It should be the fate of the Great Qin that should not be cut off. Let me travel to this parallel time and space, otherwise the Great Qin will perish under the alliance and blockade of Western powers. Dong dong dong. The door rang again, and Qin Zhen rubbed her temples helplessly. It seems that the centralization of power that has drained away their minds in the past 2 years is not a good thing, to the extent that ministers and generals have to personally report on major and minor matters. It is estimated that the lifespan of ancient emperors was not long. Firstly, there were too many concubines in the harem, and secondly, the government affairs were too busy, resulting in exhaustion. Come in. The door made of one wally was pushed open, and Minister of Works Lu Renheng and Minister of Finance Fan Jia came together. I pay my respects to your majesty. Seeing these two people, Qin Zhen's scalp tingled, so there must be nothing good going on. Tell me, you want money? Lu Renheng shook his head and said, No, I and Duke Fan are here to pay their respects to your majesty. The main purpose is to ask your majesty to decide whether to launch the Navy's 822 shipbuilding plan. Through my efforts, the materials are barely enough to build a large battleship with a full displacement of 55,000 tons. As for other destroyers and cruisers, I will meet the Navy's needs within 5 years. What is the use of one ship? Qin Zhen gestured with a calm expression for the two to sit down. The 822 shipbuilding plan was decided by him at a cabinet meeting in June this year, and he decided to devote all his efforts to building 8 10,000-ton cruisers, 2 aircraft carriers, and 2 battleships to rebuild the Great Qin Navy. Qin is not lacking in engineers, workers, or technology, but in materials. In order to rebuild the Navy, Qin Zhen planned to demolish a part of the industrial zone and rebuild steel and furnaces to build warships. Of course, this was a decision made before the system was bound, but now it's different. We don't have a shortage of resources and there's no need to search for them. Let's just start building a dumpling-style ship. The 822 shipbuilding plan has been cancelled. After careful consideration, I believe that the 822 shipbuilding plan is not feasible. The Imperial Navy needs at least 3 large fleets to meet national defense needs, so I have developed a new shipbuilding plan. What? Upon hearing this, Lu Renheng couldn't sit still. The materials engineering department required for the 822 shipbuilding plan cannot gather all 3 large fleets. Your Majesty, you can just let me go home for retirement. I can't afford to serve you. Your Majesty, building a ship is simple. Qin was the world's first steam ship and the first naval power to use gas turbines. The technology is already very mature, but the West has been blocking it for years. We don't have the materials. I believe that it is still necessary to proceed gradually and slowly. Furthermore, building ships that are too grandiose or with a displacement of over 50,000 tons and a main gun caliber of over 400 mm can easily attract hostility from Western powers and may lead to war. Qin Zhen nodded, and Lu Renheng's analysis was very accurate. After the end of World War I, the world's third-ranked Qin Navy was completely destroyed, leaving only an old and dilapidated coastal defense fleet, which was also severely damaged by Great Britain and completely blocked Qin. Therefore, when the Washington Naval Treaty was signed in 1922, Qin was not eligible to participate. Last year, the Second Naval Treaty was signed in London, and Qin was also ineligible to participate. Well, is this all about Qin? If I want to build a ship, I will build it. No one can control it. Although Qin did not have a navy, it was also blocked by Western powers, and no drop of oil could enter. However, with the system, all difficulties were easily solved. The Great Qin dynasty was directly isolated, and anyone who dared to approach Qin Island would directly send roadbed fighter jets to surround and attack. After a few years, the warships will be launched one after another. Who dares to show their teeth at the Qin? I have my own arrangements, you guys go back first. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock at the Capitol building to attend the cabinet meeting. Chapter 4. No need for you to block me, I'll just shut myself down. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. In the evening, after finishing his official duties and having dinner, Qin Zhen changed into clothes and took a walk in the imperial garden, where birds chirped and flowers were fragrant. Located in a tropical monsoon climate region, Qin Island does not have spring, summer, autumn, and winter, only the rainy and dry seasons, with an average temperature of 28 degrees Celsius, which is unbearable. Qin Zhen was from the north before his travels and had never lived in the south before. When he crossed over, he was so hot that he doubted his life. After 2 years of adaptation, he gradually became accustomed to it. The imperial garden is very quiet, and along the way, we encountered a few guards and palace maids. Among the 15 million citizens of Qin, 90% are Han Chinese. After hundreds of years of reproduction on Qin Island, their skin is slightly darker compared to their hometown of flower planting, and their height is higher than that of their hometown. According to last year's population census, this data was obtained. The average height for males is 1.72 meters and for females is 1.63 meters, which can be considered very high. This is because since the 14th century, the Qin has always been a strong country and the first capitalist country in the world. Its citizens were very wealthy and did not lack nutrition, which is why they grew so tall and strong. Xianyang, have you finished your political work? A pleasant voice came, bringing Qin Zhen, whose soul was wandering beyond the sky, back to his senses. Looking sideways, a middle-aged beautiful woman appeared in the pavilion of the imperial garden, followed by 2 palace maids aged 16 or 17. Empress Dowager Li Ying, the cheap mother of Qin Zhen, is 55 years old this year. The father of his predecessor, Qin Ming, passed away at the age of 58, most likely due to losing the First World War. The Great Qin dynasty went from prosperity to decline, completely failing to recover, suffering from heart disease and years of overwork and illness, which led to his premature death. The only son Qin Zhen, who was 18 years old, was devastated and almost fell ill, giving him the opportunity to occupy the magpie's nest. Qin Zhen walked towards the pavilion with a smile and obediently shouted, "Mom, have you eaten yet?" Li Ying has a gentle personality and enjoys reading and painting. After the death of Qin Ming, she lived in seclusion in the palace for many years and never inquired about politics. She was highly respected by civil and military officials and the people. Of course, Qin Zhen, the only son, is closely monitored by her. I thought Qin Zhen, who was only 18 years old, wouldn't be a good emperor, so I planned to ask my younger brother Li Xiong to provide more support. As a result, what was unexpected was that Qin Zhen's displayed skills caught the cabinet and military off guard. A series of reforms, including comprehensive reforms to improve people's livelihoods, economy, industry, military, and other aspects, have eliminated the old diseases of Qinji, allowing the Great Qin to slowly emerge from the shadow of its defeat more than a decade ago. They have also made preparations in advance to reduce the impact of economic crises on the Great Qin. Emperor Hongwu, in the hearts of 15 million people of the Great Qin dynasty, is already a belief and is worshipped by everyone. Today, the cabinet issued another notice, clearly stating that His Majesty the Emperor has decided that starting from the 1st of next month, the government will distribute free grain, oil, and meat to the people, without worrying about the blockade by Western powers. Who doesn't respect such an emperor? Li Ying kindly pulled Qin Zhen down and whispered, "Xiao Zhen, you haven't been eating with your mother for the past few days. Have you encountered any difficulties?" My mother heard that Great Britain warned countries around the world not to allow the sale of food to Qin, and even sent a navy to blockade Qin Island. Sigh. These bastards. It's okay, it's all within controllable range. Qin Zhen smiled and said, Mother, you don't know that the Western bandits have a strong desire to kill me, the Great Qin. They have been blocking me with all their might, and now they are cutting off grain imports in an attempt to make the Great Qin break through without attacking. How can I fulfill their wishes? Don't worry, I have found a secret channel for importing grain, oil, and meat. Western bandits can block it as they please. I also plan to directly isolate the country from tomorrow. Isolate oneself from the outside world. Li Ying was stunned, unable to turn a corner. Qin is an island country that relies on imports for almost everything, and its economy relies entirely on import and export trade. Are you seeking your own way out of seclusion? But knowing that his son is not like his mother, with the wisdom of his own son's wrist, it is estimated that he is planning something. Forget it, the harem is not allowed to engage in politics, so it's better not to delve into the details. With the abilities that my son has shown in the past 2 years, he should not be fooling around. After some wild thoughts, Li Ying took the initiative to shift the topic. Xiaozhen, your mother doesn't understand national affairs, so I can't help you either, but I have to take care of your life's important matters. Last year you promised me that you must choose a girl to get engaged this year. Is there a candidate? Are you urging for marriage again? Qin Zhen awkwardly shook his head. I am busy with government and military affairs every day, and I also have to worry about dealing with external threats. There is no time to fall in love. No, I don't have time to consider. Li Ying didn't find it strange at all, she had an expression that I knew was like this. Immediately, she reached out to take the handbag handed over by the maid and took out a stack of photos from inside. It is obvious that this was prepared for a long time. Take a look, I'll find a candidate for you. Li Ying pointed to the cute short-haired girl with bright eyes and white teeth in the first photo and introduced her. Xianyang, 19 years old, comes from a family of generals. Her father is Air Force Commander Chen Minglong, who graduated from Imperial University and is a famous talented woman. Do you like her? Zhou Yue, 20 years old, was born into the Zhou family in Xianyang. Her ancestors were the right-hand men of the founding emperor, serving as prime minister and conferred the title of Marquis of Wenan. Over the past 600 years, the Zhou family has produced 8 prime ministers, 5 prime ministers, and 13 cabinet ministers. In Zhou Yue's generation, although her population declined, she passed the government's unified examination last year and worked in the Ministry of Works, demonstrating excellent abilities. Jiang Yunxi, 21 years old. Li Ying tirelessly introduced the 10 photos in her hand, which were all carefully selected and carefully considered before finally deciding on the candidates. Appearance, physique, personal abilities, and family background are all indispensable. The royal family of the Great Qin dynasty has not flourished since the founding emperor. In the 19th century, in 1850, due to a shipwreck, the members of the royal family suffered heavy casualties. Today, there are less than 30 members of the royal family, and Qin Zhen is still the only son. Therefore, Li Ying is so worried that she can't sleep and dreams of holding her grandson or 10 grandsons. After introducing the last one, Li Ying asked eagerly. Xiaozhen, how are you? Do you like anything? Still like it all? It's okay if everyone likes it. Mom, take care of it and marry them all back. My own mother is too much of that, isn't she? Qin Zhen's head is as big as a bucket. The 10 girls in the photo should be the top 10 beauties of the Qin Empire, or the proud daughters of heaven with prominent family backgrounds and outstanding personal abilities. Do you want me to marry all of them? I am willing, is he willing? Not everyone wants to enter the palace as a concubine. Mom, I won't delay for another 2 years. I'm still young. Are you still young? You're already 20 years old this year, you must choose one. Chapter 5. National shame cannot be forgotten, revenge must be sought. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Are you still young? You're already 20 years old this year, you must choose one. Li Ying's eyebrows were inverted, and a rare expression of anger appeared on her face. The two maids serving on the side glanced at each other in surprise. I have been serving the Empress Dowager for 3 years, and it is the first time I have seen this gentle and kind Empress Dowager become angry. It is estimated that only His Majesty can provoke the Empress Dowager. Qin Zhen looked at the photo with a bitter face, took it out, and handed it to the old mother. Zhou Yue. Li Ying's eyes lit up, with a bright smile on her face, and she thumbed up to praise her son's gaze. Not bad, I really like Yue. She has a gentle and dignified personality, is knowledgeable and courteous, looks like a beautiful country, and her family background is extremely prominent. It's just her. Qin Zhen rolled his eyes. Of course, we need to carefully consider the candidate for the queen. Among the 10 girls, only Zhou Yue is the most suitable. Firstly, in the Zhou family's generation of Zhou Yue, there were only 2 siblings. The older brother died in World War I, leaving behind a 15-year-old daughter. Even if Zhou Yue becomes the queen, she is not afraid that the Zhou family will once again become strong and threaten the imperial power. The involvement of foreign relatives in politics is an unavoidable issue in imperial countries. In the history of the Great Qin dynasty, there have been multiple incidents of foreign relatives engaging in politics, and it was not until the implementation of constitutional monarchy that this hidden danger was gradually eliminated. But as long as the imperial system is not abolished, the aristocratic class will still exist, and relatives cannot become officials, nor can they use their power to make money and do business. Qin was a highly developed capitalist country, and once a wealthy family emerged, the consequences would be unimaginable. Fortunately, by far the largest capitalist in the Qin dynasty is the royal family, which controls 70% of the country's banks, education, water and electricity, railways and roads, military heavy industry, shipbuilding, shipping, and firmly controls the economic lifeline, which has stood firm in the siege of Western powers for 2 centuries. Without the control of the royal family over the economic lifeline, the Great Qin had long fallen apart. Another key point is that Zhou Yue knows her very well and is a childhood sweetheart who grew up playing with her predecessor. Her predecessor was introverted and liked to be quiet, while Zhou Yue was gentle on the outside and tough on the inside, with a fierce and decisive personality. Qin Zhen still finds it very puzzling how the two got to play together. Mother, Yue and I are childhood sweethearts. I can directly ask the Minister of Internal Affairs to propose marriage. Don't worry. No, I will personally handle your marriage. Zhou Yahue and your father are also old friends. Your father once said during his lifetime that you would appoint Yue as the crown princess. Coincidentally, Yue's mother passed away and she needs to be filial for 3 years. Now, it's just the 3rd year, and the marriage has been decided. After Li Ying finished speaking, she put away the photo with a smile on her face and got up to tidy up her long skirt. After receiving a clear response from Qin Zhen, she couldn't wait for a moment. At this critical moment when external enemies are looming, the situation is unpredictable, and Western powers are making desperate efforts to blockade, the emperor's future is an exciting event for the anxious citizens. Xiaozhen, please rest early. Mom, go to the Zhou family. After speaking, Li Ying left with his 2 maids in a lively manner, leaving Qin Zhen in chaos in the wind. As for what? Is it so urgent? Okay, anyway, we'll get married sooner or later. It's also good to get married next year. After blowing for a while in the pavilion, Qin Zhen got up and walked towards the sleeping palace, which is a single Chinese-style villa located in the center of the imperial palace. The next morning, at the Capitol building. The Parliament building, built in 1720, covers a huge area and is divided into the main building in 18 auxiliary buildings. It is distributed in the shape of an 8 trigrams at the foot of Mount Li in the northeast direction of Xianyang city. Its appearance combines Chinese and Western elements, making it a very distinctive center of power for the Great Qin Empire. There are 7 provinces on Qin Island, divided into North Province, East Province, West Province, South Province, Tai'an Province, Haidong Province, and Kyoto Province, all of which are named in Chinese. Xianyang, located on the coast, is the capital city. It used to be the world's largest port, the world's largest industrial zone, the largest financial center, the largest shipyard, and the largest city, all located in Xianyang. With a permanent population of 3 million, the city layout is reasonable, with towering buildings and exceptional prosperity. The world's first city to establish a tram and subway was not in the west, but in Xianyang, which shows how developed the Great Qin dynasty was before its decline. However, after the rise of Western powers, they regarded the Great Qin as a thorn in their side and united to fight against it. During World War I, Xianyang suffered a devastating blow, with 1/3 of its buildings destroyed by British naval guns and over 300,000 civilians killed or injured. More than a decade has passed, and the smoke of gunpowder has dissipated. After reconstruction, Xianyang city has been restored to its pre-war scale, but the traces left by the war can still be seen everywhere, such as an unexploded naval gun shell on the square in front of the Capitol building. The reason why it was left behind and surrounded by white marble fences is to ring an alarm bell for future generations and not forget the national humiliation. Every time Qin Zhen came to the National Assembly building, he would look at the 381mm shell that had been smashed into a large pit on the ground and deeply embedded in concrete. It was launched on August 12, 1917, by the Queen Elizabeth-class battleship Barham. On that day, the waters outside the port were filled with warships from 9 countries, including the rice-shaped flag and the star-shaped flag. The sound of explosions echoed through the sky, and the city of Xianyang was burning. Countless exquisite buildings were destroyed by shelling, and unarmed civilians were crying and wailing. For the first time since the founding of the People's Republic of China, the Great Qin was attacked by foreign enemies. Qin Zhen looked at the shells for a while, then turned his head to look at the towering monument not far away, as well as the black background golden dragon flag fluttering in the wind on the flagpole in front of the monument. The huge golden Qin character made his sense of mission even heavier. Revenge, we cannot let go of any of the enemies who once bullied Qin. Quietly determined, Qin Zhen turned around and walked towards the stairs in front of the Parliament building. At this time, more than 100 high-ranking officials and generals had already arrived early in the Capitol building, sitting upright and waiting for Qin Zhen to arrive. Yesterday, Western powers announced a ban on exporting grain to the Great Qin. Today, the Emperor notified a cabinet meeting to discuss and handle this crisis. Defense Minister Xianyang kidnapped Prime Minister Li Xiong next to him. Lao Li, yesterday you went to report to Your Majesty. What did Your Majesty say? Li Xiong put down his pen and whispered, didn't you see the notice? Your Majesty has decided to distribute grain, oil, and meat for free until the crisis is resolved. Upon hearing this, Xianyang's face changed. He is not blind or deaf, of course he knows about this cabinet announcement that caused a sensation throughout the country. The problem is that Western powers were determined to destroy the Great Qin and sent several fleets to roam around the Qin island, forming an indestructible copper wall and iron wall. Where did these 15 million people's food, oil, and meat come from? Lao Li, the notice has been sent out, and the Chinese people have also believed it. If we don't send out the grain by then, we're afraid we'll cause big trouble. I don't know either. Everything is decided by His Majesty, and all we can do is unconditionally obey His Majesty's will. P.S. Seeking support for Flower Monthly Pass Evaluation Tickets. Chapter 6. Galaxy Trading Company, Massive Material Delivery. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Your Majesty. When Xianyang wanted to ask something more, the guard at the door stood at attention and saluted. Everyone rubbed their feet and bowed in unison. Qin Zhen smiled and reached out to signal that all civil and military officials were on the same level, then walked to the top of the giant round table and sat down. As everyone sat down one by one, the door to the conference room closed, and a meeting began to determine the future world pattern. The atmosphere was a bit subtle, and everyone held their breath and stared at the young emperor sitting upright, holding a pen in their hands and waiting for the emperor to speak. "Don't be so serious, relax a bit." Qin Zhen smiled and said, "The content of today's meeting is very simple. First, let's announce the imperial decree." In June of this year, after 2 years of preparation, Qin Zhen decided to amend the constitution, which underwent a revolutionary change in the imperial constitution that had lasted for over 200 years. Firstly, the emperor became the Grand Marshal of the Navy, Land, and Air Force, the highest commander, and had the power to launch wars against foreign countries without a vote of parliament. Secondly, the emperor has the power to appoint and dismiss the prime minister within a reasonable range. Thirdly, the emperor's decree is superior to the law, and administrative institutions such as the parliament, military, public security, procuratorial and judicial organs must unconditionally implement it. By changing the constitution like this, constitutional monarchy has become a thing of the past, and the Great Qin dynasty has once again entered an era of imperial autocracy and the supremacy of imperial power. The reason why no one opposes Qin Zhen's change is that the effective period of this new constitution is during his reign. When he dies, the constitutional monarchy will be restored, and the emperor will be like a mascot. Of course, it's useless to oppose. Qin Zhen has already replaced the cabinet ministers and the main generals of the land, sea, and air forces with confidants. Who dares to oppose? Another reason is that Qin Zhen's ability is evident to all, and when an economic crisis broke out, he acted as if he were in profit, turning the tide and reducing a lot of losses for the Great Qin, unlike the Western countries that suffered catastrophic disasters and suffered great damage. So, Qin Zhen's smooth centralization of power did not cause too much turbulence. This imperial decree was issued for the first time after the constitutional amendment, and everyone gathered their spirits and perked up their ears to listen. "I have decided that starting from January 1st next year, the Great Qin dynasty will begin a 3-year period of seclusion, urgently recall its citizens who are abroad, refuse to return to China within 3 months, and cancel its nationality. During the period of seclusion, all foreign trade will be suspended, and no one is allowed to go to sea. No one is allowed to approach the 100-kilometer sea area of Qin Island. Violators will be expelled and attacked by the Navy and Air Force." Qin Zhen's resounding and powerful words fell, causing an uproar in the conference room. The civil and military officials present were all stunned and bewildered. "What is Your Majesty the Emperor doing? Isolate oneself from the outside world. Leaving aside the fact that we can't keep ourselves in seclusion, what will happen to the food, oil, and meat of 15 million people on Qin Island once we become isolated? Eating mud? Or eating grass?" Shocked, Xianyang had a hot temper and was the first to ask a question. "Your Majesty, I am not against isolationism. Anyway, the Western white pigs have been blocking the Great Qin for years. After the outbreak of the economic crisis, import and export trade has been sluggish. In order to save their lives, the Western white pigs have even launched a trade war and currency war, which is unlikely to end in a short period of time. It is better to suspend trade to avoid being affected by those cowardly sentiments. But we're closed off. Where do our food and meat come from? They'll starve to death." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone nodded in agreement. Indeed, the most scarce thing in the Great Qin dynasty at present is food. Without food, 15 million people would starve to death on Qin Island, leading to large-scale riots and even tragedies such as switching children to eat. The reason why Western powers banned the export of grain to the Great Qin was also for this purpose, to internally disintegrate the Great Qin and achieve the effect of annihilating it without bloodshed. Qin Zhen remained calm and said calmly, there's no need to worry about the food issue. I will solve it. Next month, we will gradually send 10 million tons of rice, 100,000 tons of edible oil, and beef, mutton, and pork. In addition to grain, oil, and meat, there are also many industrial resources, such as steel, copper, aluminum, rubber, oil, nickel, and other resources urgently needed by Qin, with a quantity of no less than 5 million tons. Don't ask about the origin, you just need to take over and mobilize workers across the country to start a 3-year large-scale construction. Quiet, quiet. As Qin Zhen broke out one surprising and joyful news after another, the conference room fell silent and needles could be heard. Really? Is there really so much food resources? If it is true, with the heritage of the Great Qin dynasty, why worry about not rising again and restoring its former glory? Everyone was restless in their hearts, both expecting it to be true and feeling that it might not be possible. After all, if tens of millions of tons of supplies want to be transported to Qin Island, it is impossible to avoid the blockade of Western powers. The Great Qin Navy is already in name only. How can we protect the smooth arrival of supplies to Qin Island? Li Xiong furrowed his brows and was truly frightened. My nephew said yesterday that he will solve it, so that's how it is solved. In his opinion, Qin Zhen's words just now were just deceiving people and absolutely impossible to achieve. Qin Zhen observed the changes in everyone's expressions and knew that no one believed him. It's normal. Before the system is bound, he wouldn't believe anyone who told him that he could obtain so many supplies under the encirclement of Western powers, 3 circles left and 3 circles right. You are not a goddamn immortal. Don't brag. Squeak. Just as Xiaoteng was about to dig deeper, the door to the conference room was pushed open. Everyone turned their heads and saw Lu Kang, the commander of the Navy Coast Guard fleet, rushing in with a hurried expression. Your Majesty, a fleet of ships called Galaxy Trading Company has arrived at the port, with a total of 340 giant cargo ships loaded with supplies. They claim that the supplies you have purchased have arrived and are ready for us to receive them. Hush. Upon hearing Lu Kang's report, everyone sitting took a deep breath and couldn't help but stand up, staring at Qin Zhen with bright eyes. Oh my goodness, is your Majesty not deceiving anyone and really able to obtain supplies? Seeing these high-ranking officials and generals looking bewildered, Qin Zhen almost burst out laughing. The system is very considerate. The caught items will be shipped to Qin Island by cargo ship and labeled with the label of Galaxy Trading Company, which greatly reduces people's suspicion. Do you want to ask where these cargo ship supplies come from? Go check it out. In this era without satellites and immature aircraft technology, how difficult is it to find a fleet on the vast ocean or a fleet deliberately hidden by the system? Lu Kang, please arrange for manpower to unload the goods, count them and deliver them to the North District Strategic Storage Warehouse. Notify the 1st Army Division to station. Yes. Lu Kang ran out of the conference room in high spirits. Just now he boarded the ship to inspect, and the supplies sent by Galaxy Trading Company were extremely abundant, including rice, oil, finished steel, finished copper, and other resources that Qin could not afford with money, and there were still many in quantity. With these resources, the Navy should have new types of warships. Sit down, let's continue the meeting. P.S. Seeking support for Flower Monthly Pass Evaluation Tickets. Chapter 7. Eagle-class aircraft carrier, Hellcat carrier-based aircraft. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The good news brought by Lu Kang made the boulder weighing on everyone's hearts disappear, the haze cleared away, and the atmosphere in the conference room became relaxed and lively. No matter where the emperor bought these supplies, they haven't used any financial funds, so why bother asking? Finance Minister Fan Jia and Li Xiong exchanged a glance, ignoring their tacit choice. Fan Jia and Li Xiong didn't ask, and others didn't want to ask either. Firstly, it had nothing to do with them, and secondly, they didn't want to make the emperor unhappy. A lot of words will lead to mistakes, don't blame yourself. Ministry of Works, Navy Equipment Department, let's prepare. I have already formulated a new shipbuilding plan. Next month, I will begin to dispatch workers to the Xianyang port shipbuilding base, and the Chang'an port shipyard will start building new types of warships. The warships are mainly aircraft carriers, submarines, and fast destroyers. The number of battleships and cruisers should be reduced as much as possible. My plan is to build 8.15 heavy aircraft carriers with a full displacement of over 80,000 tons within 5 years, using pure steel and iron armor plates. The drawings have been prepared for you and will be sent to the engineering department tomorrow. What? Abandoning battleships and shifting the focus to aircraft carriers. Qin Zhen's decision was that the civil servant was a monk named Zhang Er, and he couldn't figure it out. The military generals couldn't sit still and immediately spoke up to dissuade him. Especially for naval officers, all cells in their bodies are refusing. Deng Qi, the staunch giant ship and artillery enthusiast and chief of staff of the Navy, stood up. He was 1.9 meters tall, with a burly physique and a strong sense of oppression, and his voice was also very loud. Your Majesty. Why reduce the number of battleships? Battleships are the dominant force at sea, and we should build more battleships. That's right, aircraft carriers are just auxiliary ships, and battleships are the main force in naval warfare. The Battle of Jutland has proven that battleships with larger calibers and thicker armor can easily have fewer enemies and more. Navy Commander Xianyang also stood up to agree, unanimously believing that battleships are more important than aircraft carriers and cannot be abandoned. Qin Zhen had anticipated their fierce reaction early on. Before the outbreak of World War II, the development of fighter jets was not yet mature, so although the theory of aviation victory had emerged, the mainstream was still the theory of giant ships and artillery victory, and 90% of naval commanders firmly chose battleships. The reason is simple. Battleships are representative of artillery giants, with a typical feature of huge and sturdy hulls, equipped with large caliber guns, and fierce firepower. During naval battles, they are arranged in formation and bombarded with artillery, with astonishing power. What ship can withstand shells weighing 1 ton at a time? In addition to attacking enemy ships, battleships can also provide firepower support to the army. The naval guns fired at the shore in unison, with a damage effect more than twice that of carrier-based aircraft bombing. Don't be impatient. Qin Zhen asked with a smile on his face. Battleships use cannons as weapons, aircraft carriers use airplanes as weapons, and the strike range of airplanes is much higher than that of naval guns. This puts the battleships at an absolute disadvantage and they can only be passively attacked, unable to fight back. So, it was the aircraft carrier that eliminated the battleships, essentially the aircraft that eliminated the cannons. Imagine a fleet several hundred kilometers away, with planes departing and penetrating at low altitudes. When the enemy discovers that the planes are already overhead, if a battleship is used, the fleet must be driven within 40 kilometers of the coastline before firing. The enemy's surveillance measures can detect the fleet from 200 kilometers away. After being discovered by the opponent, the fleet had to drive another 140 kilometers, at the speed of a battleship, for 4 hours. After 4 hours, the yellow cauliflower had cooled down. But aircraft carriers are different. The core of carrier strike is carrier-based aircraft, which can easily reach a combat radius of 100.400 kilometers and can also carry bombs and aviation torpedoes. And in terms of tactics, it can also enter the attack route from different angles and evade air defense firepower. Coupled with the absolute reconnaissance advantage of the aviation force itself, the control area of the aircraft carrier is 100 times that of a battleship. Through multiple waves of airstrikes on the aircraft carrier, it can achieve dozens of times the attack efficiency of a battleship. The last reason is the cost. If we were to build a battleship with a displacement of 70,000 tons, we would have to use 20,000 tons of steel for armor. Including the development of new cannons, the price is much higher than that of aircraft carriers, and the efficiency is far inferior to that of aircraft carriers. So, why choose battleships? Aircraft carriers are the mainstay of future naval battles. The analysis was very detailed, leaving Deng Qi and Xianyang speechless. Upon careful analysis, it seems that the emperor is absolutely right. In front of groups of carrier-based aircraft, battleships are simply live targets. But the problem arises again. Based on current aircraft technology, the firepower of carrier-based aircraft is far inferior to that of battleships. Your Majesty, I am convinced that the future development trend of aircraft carriers is indeed better than that of battleships, but it cannot be compared to battleships in the short term. The number of aircraft carried by aircraft carriers and the amount of ammunition carried by carrier-based aircraft are a big problem that cannot be avoided. What is the difference between 100 or 200 pounds of bombs and a rough and fleshy battleship and scratching the itch? Qiang Songzhan shrugged and threw out this seemingly unsolvable problem. Qin Zhen smiled slightly and took out a stack of drawings from the folder in front of him, throwing them to Xianyang. Take a look at the design drawings of the new aircraft carrier and carrier-based aircraft, and the accurate data has been annotated. What? The air instantly solidified, and Qi Mingsong's hands trembled as he looked at the uniquely shaped but reasonably arranged aircraft carrier on the paper. Standard displacement 60,100 tons, full load displacement 86,000 tons, length 323.8 meters, width 76.8 meters, draft 11.4 meters, with a range of 12,000 kilometers, capable of carrying 110 aircraft of various types. Hellcat carrier-based fighter, single-seat single-engine flat-wing piston-type all-metal single-wing carrier-based fighter, with a maximum flight speed of 612 km per hour, a practical ceiling of 11,369 meters, and a maximum range of 2,462 kilometers. On both sides of the wings, there are 6 12.7 mm aircraft machine guns equipped with 2,400 rounds of ammunition, and a 20 mm machine gun can also be mounted on the inner section of the wings. Typically, a 900 kg bomb can be mounted under the belly of the aircraft, or 6 rockets can be mounted under the wings. Is this a carrier-based aircraft? It's too scary. The features of a fully enclosed cockpit, retractable landing gear, and an all-metal body and wings make Xianyang, who joined the military at the age of 18, question mark his entire career from an ordinary sailor to a naval commander, as these designs are unheard of and unheard of. Deng Qi, who leaned over to watch, exclaimed in surprise, "What's this? A carrier-based aircraft that can fly over 2,000 kilometers. It's really fake." Also, a heavy aircraft carrier with a full displacement of 86,000 tons has an all-metal deck. Is it necessary? It's difficult to repair if it's blown out. P.S. Seeking support for Flower Monthly Pass Evaluation Tickets. Chapter 8. Xianyang Class Aircraft Carrier, Revenge Class Battleship. You are listening at novelfull.audio. There is another issue. If the deck, which is over 300 meters long and 70.80 meters wide, is entirely made of steel, the soldiers inside the aircraft carrier may be killed by the heat. Deng Qi expressed his doubts, and other naval generals also believed that, including Army and Air Force generals and civil servants, they also understood the Navy very well. The reason behind this is that the Great Qin dynasty began to dominate the ocean from the late 13th century to the early 14th century, and was also an island country. Therefore, the Navy culture was strong, from the elderly with white hair to children aged 5 or 6, who could tell the glorious history of the Imperial Navy, and became more familiar with warships and naval knowledge. The reason why Great Britain still dares not claim to be an old naval power is entirely due to the presence of the Qin dynasty. What if the Qin Navy is destroyed? Since the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1282, more than 600 years have passed. Due to the rise of the Great Qin dynasty through the Navy, national defense and security cannot be separated from the Navy. Throughout history, the monarchy cabinet has attached great importance to education, especially in regards to naval schools. There are dozens of professional ship manufacturing, naval technology, and naval officer colleges within the territory of the Great Qin dynasty, and all universities have also established departments of ship engineering to explore and cultivate talents. After a disastrous defeat in World War I, the Royal Navy of Qin was completely destroyed and sank into the cold Indo Sea. However, there were still hundreds of thousands of naval talents and elites in Qin who could be recruited to build a new navy at any time. There were also millions of senior engineers and technical workers engaged in the shipbuilding industry. The beautiful country of Great Britain, such as Gaul and Fusang, and other Western powers, are making every effort to bring down the Great Qin and lock it up. The purpose is self-evident, which is to prevent the Great Qin from rising again and threatening their maritime hegemony and interests. Your Majesty. Seeing Qin Zhen not speaking, Deng Qi was about to speak when he was interrupted by Qin Zhen waving his hand. Stop, could you please take a closer look at the design? There is an air conditioning system inside the aircraft carrier. Qin Zhen understood everyone's question. Before the end of World War II, most countries used wooden aircraft carrier decks. The deck wood is not an ordinary material, but a teak wood that can match with yellow pears. It is produced in Donggrania and is often 50 meters high, equivalent to the height of a 20-story building in later times. Teak wood is tough and corrosion-resistant, which is even more prominent when used on aircraft carriers. However, it takes 50 years for it to take shape, and at that time, various countries even cut it into a rare tree species in order to build ships. It is not necessarily cheaper than before. Moreover, during World War II, in maritime warfare, taking the Pacific as an example, the fleet cruised in tropical and subtropical regions every day. Due to technological limitations at that time, aircraft carriers without air conditioning were bound to experience unbearable heat. If a steel deck is used, the excellent heat transfer performance of the metal will turn the entire aircraft carrier into an oven. In this way, not only will the equipment of the aircraft carrier become more prone to accidents due to high temperatures, but even soldiers will not have the energy to maintain combat. And teak is different. It has good insulation performance, which can alleviate the hot living environment of soldiers. In addition, during World War II, most of the tires of fighter jets were hollow, just like car tires. The disadvantage of rubber tires is fatal. Once the temperature rises, the tire pressure will increase sharply. If replaced with a steel deck, the fighter jet is likely to be unable to take off or land. Even so, on wooden decks, logistics still need to constantly water and cool the carrier-based aircraft. The last advantage, as Deng Qi mentioned earlier, is that the metal deck has been damaged by the explosion, making it extremely difficult to repair it in a short period of time. The biggest advantage of wooden decks is that they are easy to maintain. For example, during World War II, the USS Enterprise, an aircraft carrier of the United States, was hit by 18 Fusang Army fighter jets with all their might in 1942. A total of 7 bombs fell on the USS Enterprise, causing the deck to instantly catch fire and become paralyzed on the sea. In theory, the Enterprise was neither dead nor useless. Unexpectedly, in the next few hours, some of the decks on the Enterprise had already been laid and the takeoff and landing capabilities of the carrier-based aircraft had been restored. In less than 10 days, the Enterprise participated in the Battle of Santa Cruz and was once again hit by overwhelming bombs, but was quickly repaired. Throughout the history of the Enterprise being attacked, its rapid recovery of combat power was attributed to the wooden deck. However, the Little Eagle-class aircraft carrier that Qin Zhen was going to build was intended for jet planes, and piston fighters were just a transition. Besides, if we allow the enemy to attack the aircraft carrier, why do we need submarines, destroyers, frigates, cruisers, and battleships? Don't ask. Besides the Xianyang-class aircraft carrier, there are also 2 types of super battleships in the new shipbuilding plan. When the fleet goes on an expedition, it is necessary for all warships to protect the aircraft carrier. Unless all frigates are completely destroyed, the aircraft carrier will be attacked by the enemy. Excuse me, since all the frigates have been destroyed, do we still need to consider how to repair the aircraft carrier deck? The words fell, leaving everyone speechless. Yes, according to your Majesty's plan, aircraft carriers are the core force of the fleet and other warships have to play the role of bodyguards. After the bodyguard dies, we still need to struggle with how to repair the aircraft carrier deck. Xianyang flipped through the design in his hand and saw the blueprint of the Avengers-class battleship, Iowa-class battleship, and the Super Avengers-class battleship, Montana-class battleship, and his face immediately changed. As a naval general, he knows too much about battleships. If these two battleships are completed, the Royal Qin Navy will once again become the world's #1. And the shipbuilding plan mentioned that 12 battleships will be built. Very good, the Navy needs giant battleships too much. 12 of them can barely meet the Navy's needs. Your Majesty, did you say so earlier? I fully agree with your Majesty's decision to rebuild the Imperial Navy with the Xianyang-class aircraft carrier as the core. Deng Qi also saw the new battleship, swallowed his saliva, and nodded eagerly in agreement. Yes, your Majesty is wise, and aircraft carriers are the main force. Anyway, let's agree to this plan first. Anyway, your Majesty has agreed to build 12 battleships. As for the combat effectiveness of the aircraft carrier, just conduct a practical test. The aircraft carrier is gone, isn't there still 12 battleships left? Your Majesty, the Naval Equipment Department will initiate the shipbuilding plan as soon as possible. When will the materials be delivered? The first batch has arrived at Xianyang port, and the Navy, Army, and Air Force will be divided equally. The next batch will arrive at Xianyang port in half a month, all of which belong to the Navy. After speaking, Qin Zhen lit a cigarette and took 2 puffs. The reason why the Air Force wants to share this batch of supplies equally with the Army and Navy is that in the next 3 years, the Air Force will be responsible for defending Qin Island, and the Navy's carrier-based aircraft will be built for the Air Force to use as land-based fighter jets. No objections, right? P.S. Seeking support for Flower Monthly Pass Evaluation Tickets. Chapter 9. Future Goals, Revenge, Expansion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. And this good thing. Your Majesty has begun to value the Air Force. Upon hearing that Qin Zhen was going to allocate resources to the Air Force and had designated the Air Force to undertake the defense of Qin Island for the next 3 years, the Air Force commander Chen Minglong, who was wandering in the sky, was immediately invigorated. The Navy, Land, and Air Forces of the Great Qin Empire were called the Royal Navy, while the Army was called the Royal Army. However, the Air Force did not have the prefix Royal, and its presence was too weak. In 1917, the Qin Navy suffered a devastating defeat to the Western powers and the Allied fleet in the Indo-Sea, with all 3 fleets destroyed. The proud Navy was gone, and in order to protect local security, the Qin Air Force was officially established as the world's earliest independent air force. Until the end of World War I, the Qin Air Force gradually equipped over 50,000 various types of fighter jets. However, due to the immaturity of technology, the role that the Air Force can play is extremely limited, allowing the coalition fleet to break through the Air Force blockade and bombard Qin Island at an extremely small cost. At the moment of crisis, the Air Force intensified and launched suicide attacks with fighter jets loaded with explosives, ultimately repelling Western powers and fleets and defending Qin Island. The question is, why hasn't the Air Force, which has made great contributions, received any commendation, not even a royal title? The reason behind this is that for over 600 years since the founding of the Great Qin dynasty, Qin Island has never been attacked by foreign enemies. It has been a maritime hegemon for 2 centuries and the world's largest economy. Before the 20th century, the capital city of Xianyang was the world's desired center. The splendid flower planting culture that has lasted for thousands of years has been perfectly inherited by the Great Qin dynasty. Unlike the native flower planting that was plagued by mite infestation, in such a country with highly developed economy, culture, and military, can the people not be proud? So, the Air Force did not block the enemy in the first time, causing fatal strikes to the coastal areas of Qin Island. Hundreds of thousands of unarmed civilians died under enemy naval guns, and property losses were incalculable. Even if the Air Force used human bombs to win and repel the enemy, they still carried the blame in the end. The previous Emperor Qin Ming was well aware that the Air Force not only had no mistakes, but also made great contributions, turning the tide of the building into a hero. However, public opinion is difficult to defy, and the Shanghai military faction is too strong. After comprehensive consideration, the Air Force has not been given the honor it deserves. More than a decade has passed, and although the size of the Air Force has been demanding expansion and increased military spending every year, it has been tightly suppressed by the Navy, leading to deeper and deeper conflicts between the two sides, which occasionally erupt. No, before Chen Minglong could speak, Navy Commander Xianyang became unhappy. The allocation of resources by the Air Force means that the Navy will build fewer warships. Your Majesty. Shut up. Qin Zhen gave Xianyang an expressionless glance, which frightened the fierce general. When the emperor became angry, everyone present felt a chill in their spine, their eyes, noses, and hearts, and they dared not breathe. The high-ranking generals were extremely afraid of Qin Zhen. It has only been more than 2 years since Qin Zhen ascended the throne and proclaimed himself emperor. The reason why Qin Zhen was able to centralize power successfully is due to his abilities and skills. The foundation laid by the late Emperor Qin Ming is also the reason why he was able to do so. The most important factor was that Qin Zhen utilized the huge wealth of the royal family to rebuild the semi-dead intelligence agency organization, Black Ice Platform, which had existed since the founding of the country, and trained a large number of elite agents to thoroughly investigate military and political officials in an all-around manner, in order to capture these old foxes. As a traveler, although Qin Zhen has never been in power, he is completely a political novice. However, I haven't eaten pork and haven't seen pigs run. Take control of the media and newspapers, and firmly hold the intelligence agency organization Black Ice Station, which is even more powerful than the royal guards. No one can jump up, dare not cooperate and reveal black information every minute, causing you to lose your reputation. Qin was not a feudal society, and the people had the right to vote. No one could go against public opinion. May I ask, who has a clean foundation as an official? The 3 armies, sea, land, and air, I treat them equally. Don't talk nonsense. Tap the Navy, Qin Zhen said in a deep voice. In the future, the Great Qin will definitely seek revenge and make the miscellaneous people who once bullied the empire pay the price, expanding their territory with all their might. Since the end of the European War until now, I believe you have also experienced the bitterness of resource scarcity, have you? Upon hearing this, everyone instinctively nodded. Bitter, too bitter, it's simply not a human life. The fatal disadvantage of island countries is resource scarcity. Without colonies, they cannot develop at all. The 3 largest island countries in the world, Great Britain, Fusang, and Qin. Not to mention Great Britain, since the 17th century when it allied with the navies of Gaul and Holland to defeat the Great Qin, it has become a maritime hegemon and seized control of more than half of East Asia. Colonies have spread all over the world, claiming to be an empire where the sun never sets and resources and wealth are abundant. After the Black Boat incident in Fusang, it emerged that Western powers intended to support and contain the Tsarist Empire. After seizing the Goryeo Peninsula, its strength rapidly expanded, and the European War ended. Its naval strength became the 3rd in the world. Yesterday, it brazenly launched an invasion and occupied northeast China in a despicable and shameless way. With this resource treasure trove in northeast China, the resource crisis in Fusang has been greatly alleviated, and wealth can also be plundered from occupied areas, resulting in a significant increase in strength. The Qin. Only the Great Qin suffered the most, lacking resources and suffering heavy losses in the European War. Its military strength fell from 3rd in the world to 10th in the world. Without the navy, can the army still swim to land? The air force, not to mention, can only serve as a watchdog. Unfortunately, Western powers still take advantage of your illness to take your life, and at all costs block and suppress Qin, making it clear that they must kill you. Revenge. Expand. The more civil and military officials think, the more angry they become. Anger churns in their hearts, and they yearn for land as never before. Your Majesty, expansion is necessary. We must exterminate the angers and seek revenge. Yes, starting from the 18th century, millions of soldiers of the people died tragically in the hands of the hybrid Angsa people, and even resorted to vicious blockade and suppression in an attempt to destroy the Great Qin. This revenge is not avenged. I apologize to my ancestors, I apologize to my ancestors, I apologize to my predecessors. Except for the Aung Sans, who are the good people who participated in the siege of the Great Qin, including the beautiful countries of Gaul, Italy, Helan, Zabanya, Tsarist Russia, and Fusang dwarfs. Who hasn't had the blood of our common soldiers in the Great Qin? When we recover our strength, none of them can escape. First fight the Ansa people, and then kill all the little devils. His mother, dare to invade the 3 eastern provinces and kill our compatriots. Speaking of the little devilish son of a bitch, last month he dared to seal and confiscate the assets of our Great Qin merchants in Fusang. Your Majesty, what do you think should be done? P.S. Seeking support for Flower monthly pass evaluation tickets. Chapter 10. The Germans who share the same illness as the Great Qin. You are listening at novelfull.audio. How to handle it. A few shades of darkness flashed in Qin Zhen's eyes, and he had already put the little devil on the must-kill list in his heart. The hatred towards the little devil is that the child has no mother. It's a long story. If you want to ask Qin Zhen who he wants to kill the most, the little devil must be ranked first. This is different from the people of the Great Qin. Since the founding of the Great Qin dynasty, it has been a full 649 years. Although the Han ethnic group accounts for 90% of the 15 million people, it has gradually formed an independent ethnic system due to the long time it has been away from the native land of planting flowers. Cultural inheritance, language, national customs are almost the same as those of flower-planting nations. The biggest difference is the difference in ideological concepts, which is influenced by Western culture, hence the early entry into constitutional monarchy. Fortunately, the Qin dynasty was not westernized, so the best thing to do was to take its essence and discard its dross, and borrow good administrative systems and ideas. In the Great Qin dynasty, there was no saying of worshipping foreign things, because 99% of the people looked down on Westerners, who made their ancestors too wealthy, and they were still world powers until World War I. After the formation of an independent ethnic system, the people of Qin were not so concerned about the local cultivation of flowers. Even if Fusang invaded the cultivation of flowers, it did not cause too much trouble in Qin. Therefore, what they hated the most was not the little devils, but the Western powers led by Great Britain, which was simply hatred to the bone. The current Great Qin is too similar to the Germans, with a similarity of 70%. The Germans lost World War I, burdened with huge war reparations, and suffered even worse from the economic crisis. A large number of people lost their jobs, and countless people starved to death on the streets. Even eating a full meal became a luxury for millions of Germanic people, which can be said to be extremely tragic. Qin is not much better either. If it weren't for Qin Zhen, a trailblazer, appearing, it would have been even worse than the Germans. The downfall of the country was only a matter of time. Oh, Germanic. During his contemplation, Qin Zhen's mind came up with a man who failed the art exam and became the leader of pyramid schemes, with a small beard. The current time is 1931, and it is less than 2 years before the failing candidate became the head of the Germanic club. After the death of Hindenburg the following year, He became the head of the Yuan dynasty, and the Second World War officially began to warm up. As the saying goes, the enemy of the enemy is friends. The Great Qin and the Germanic Empire were the victims of the First World War and the ones who suffered the most from being bullied by Western powers. Why not unite and keep warm? Qin Zhen didn't want to get anything from the Germans. In this parallel time and space, the Germans were not the leaders of the Second Industrial Revolution, but the Great Qin was. In terms of industrial strength, talent reserves, and education system, the Great Qin was slightly stronger than the Germans. Don't forget, the population of the Germanic people is tens of millions, while the population of the Great Qin was only 15 million. Even if they didn't experience the ravages of the epidemic a few years ago, the population was only 25 million, which shows how strong the creativity of the flower-planting nation is. Qin Zhen wants to form an alliance with the Germans, with the main purpose of using the sword to kill. The Second World War was about national strength and population. After all, World War II in history was so massive and intense that it shook people's hearts and could easily be a massive battle involving millions of people. With him as the emperor of the Great Qin, the country's strength will only become stronger and stronger, without lacking weapons and equipment. But the population cannot increase in the short term, which is a fatal disadvantage. The only fortunate thing is that after the baptism of the epidemic 6 years ago, most elderly people were unable to hold on, and the rest were strong young and middle-aged people. Among the 15 million people, there will be no more than 1 million men who can join the military, including elderly, weak, sick, and disabled women and children. Men have all gone to war, who goes into the factory to tighten screws and manufacture weapons. Since we cannot increase the population, why not open up the pattern and find a thug to achieve our goal? The Germans are a good thug. After the outbreak of World War II, as long as there was no shortage of resources, the Germans who failed did not blindly command and operate. They also had Qin cutting off the supply of British overseas colonies from behind, while blocking the Atlantic Ocean and preventing beautiful countries from transfusing blood to British polar bears. When Great Britain was defeated, hanging polar bears would still be a problem. As for Gaul, it can be ignored. I am not afraid that the expansion of the Germanic Empire will threaten the Great Qin, and the fierce polar bear is not so easily destroyed. If a dog bites its fur, both sides will be harmed, which is most beneficial for the Great Qin dynasty. The last strong enemy, beautiful country. Qin Zhen pondered for a moment and decided to personally take action. Population. How about going to plant flowers and attract local people? Under the rule of Chiang Kai-shek, the Republic of China experienced years and months of warlord warfare, leading to the collapse of the social system, which was difficult for the people to survive. In addition, the crazy exploitation by Western powers and the invasion of foreign enemies resulted in as much suffering as the common people. A natural disaster could cost millions of lives. Isn't it a perfect solution to the problem of insufficient population that 400 million people of various flowers have immigrated to Daqin one after another, with 40 to 50 million coming? Don't worry about whether Chiang Kai-shek will agree. As long as he is given some benefits, this guy is probably extremely willing. After all, planting flowers is lacking in everything, except for not lacking in people. If you don't agree, it's okay to directly threaten with force. Your Majesty. Seeing Qin Zhen frowning slightly and his expression constantly changing, Li Xiong beside him couldn't help but remind him softly. Qin Zhen put aside his thoughts and smiled. I'm sorry, I'm lost in thought. Continue with the previous topic. Since Fusang has frozen and confiscated the assets of our Daqin merchants in Fusang, we are also like them, confiscating the assets of Fusang merchants in Daqin. Chancellor of the Exchequer Fan Jie shook his head and said, Your Majesty is unaware that Fusang had a premeditated plan. Before announcing the confiscation of the assets of our Great Qin merchants in Fusang, we had already prepared in advance to allow the overseas Chinese merchants in Fusang to secretly transfer their assets. His mother, this little devil is really a chicken thief. Qin Zhen sighed. The situation cannot be controlled by people. Qin is currently at its weakest point, and anyone can take a bite. No matter how angry you are, there is no way to stop it. How much money is there approximately? Not much, 2 billion Qin yuan. 2 billion. Qin Zhen nodded, still within an acceptable range. The Qin yuan is the oldest paper currency in the world and also the gold standard currency. Its exchange rate is the same as the rice yuan. 2 billion Qin yuan is not much, but also quite a lot for the current Great Qin. Let's keep an account first, and one day we'll have the little devil return the principal with interest. Yes. Fan Jie had no choice but to do so. The next issue, after the implementation of the national policy of isolationism, will definitely cause a chain reaction. The cabinet should do its best to appease the people, explain the causes and consequences to the people, and try to unite the people's hearts as much as possible. Qin Zhen's biggest concern is this: after all, the economy of the Great Qin dynasty mainly relies on import and export trade, and isolation from the outside world can cause a huge uproar. This problem is not handled well, it is very serious. Li Xiong took a deep breath and confidently assured himself. Your Majesty, rest assured that I am ready to carry out uninterrupted publicity throughout the country starting from tomorrow, to let the public know Your Majesty's good intentions. P.S. Seeking support for Flower monthly pass evaluation tickets.